You know that feeling when you recommend an amazing animated movie to a friend and they just hit you with, oh, I'm not really into cartoons? It happens all the time, right? At least here in the US. And it actually points to this really deep, kind of weird cultural question that we're going to dig into. I mean, think about it. Why is an entire art form, an entire medium, so often just brushed aside as something for kids? Animation is just a tool, like a camera or a paintbrush. So, how did we get here? Well, we're going to play detective and follow the clues that led to this very American dilemma. So here's our game plan. We're going to start at the very beginning, then look at the massive footprint left by the Golden Age. After that, we'll see how TV completely changed the game, and then jump to the 90s, which brings us right up to the identity crisis we're seeing today. All right, first stop on our investigation takes us way back, over a century ago. This was a critical moment, a fork in the road, where American animation went one way and a lot of the rest of the world went another. But before we get into that, let's just get on the same page. At its absolute core, animation is not a genre. It's just the art of making still images look like they're moving. That's it. It's a technique, a medium. Okay, so check this out. This is where you can see that first split happen. Over in France, one of the first real animated shorts was a mature story about a love triangle, definitely aimed at grown-ups. But then, 14 years later in the US, the first major animation was basically just a series of silly gags. The creator was way more interested in showing off the technology than telling a deep story. And that right there, that set a precedent. Let's move on to our next big clue. And honestly, this one is less a fork in the road and more like a 12-lane superhighway built almost single-handedly by Walt Disney. His staggering success created the blueprint for American animation that would last for generations. I mean, it's kind of wild how quickly Disney Studio just changed everything. In less than 10 years, they go from introducing synchronized sound in Steamboat Willie to pioneering vibrant, full-color, and then, the real game changer, they dropped the world's first feature-length animated movie, Snow White. And this number right here, this is why the Disney model became the model. Snow White was a monster hit. We're talking $8 million back in 1937. That's an insane amount of money. It made more than any movie with sound before it. And you know what happens in Hollywood when a formula is that successful, right? Everybody copies it. And that blueprint was aimed directly at families. So what was in that blueprint? Well, one of the keys was this really simple but brilliant visual coding. You see it right here. Evil characters, like the Queen, sharp, pointy, angular. Good characters, like Snow White, soft, cuddly, and round. It's a super effective way to tell a young audience who to root for without needing a ton of complicated dialogue. And the humor, 100% designed for kids. It was all slapstick. You know how in modern animated movies they sneak in all those clever jokes for the parents? Yeah, there's none of that here. The gags in Snow White were all about a turtle getting bonked on the head or Dopey being clumsy. It's fun, for sure, but it wasn't trying to be anything more than that. Okay, our next big chapter takes animation out of the fancy movie theaters and puts it right in the middle of the American living room. And this is where its identity as kid stuff gets locked in, because this is the age of the Saturday morning cartoon. But before animation got totally boxed into that weekend morning slot, there was this one hugely important exception, a show that proved without a doubt that animation could kill it in prime time with a grown-up audience. The Flintstones was not a kids' show, period. It was a sitcom that just happened to be animated. It was on at night, it made fun of other adult sitcoms, and it dealt with totally grown-up stuff like job stress, money problems, even infertility. And get this, it was the first animated show ever to show a couple in the same bed. It was a peek at what could have been, but that Saturday morning wave was just too powerful. All right, let's jump forward to the late 80s and early 90s. This is a massive moment. Animation for adults is about to make this huge comeback, but it splits. It splits right down the middle, creating this divide that we're still living with today. So you've got these two totally different paths opening up. On one side, you have Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It was amazing, but its appeal to adults was all about nostalgia, remembering the cartoons they grew up with. Then, just 1 year later, bam, The Simpsons arrives. And it could not care less about the past. It was all about using animation for sharp, modern social satire aimed squarely at adults. And this is so important. The Simpsons wasn't just a hit. It was a cultural atom bomb. It was so successful that for the next 20 years, it basically defined what adults animation meant in America. It almost always meant satirical comedy. Think about it. Family Guy, South Park, Archer, they all walk through the door that The Simpsons kicked open. And that pretty much brings us to today. After a century of these twists and turns, American animation is left with this identity crisis. It's kind of caught between two very specific, very narrow boxes. I mean, just look at the difference when you compare it to Japan. In Japan, anime is just for everyone. There are shows for little kids, for teens, for adults, and in every genre you can imagine: drama, horror, romance, you name it. Here in the US, things are still mostly sorted into two buckets. It's either a family film or it's an adult comedy. There's not a lot of room in between. But the story isn't over, not by a long shot. We are seeing some really exciting signs of change. You've got shows like Adventure Time that look like they're for kids, but they're hiding these incredibly complex, dark ideas. Or The Legend of Korra, which told this serious, dramatic story for young adults without a hint of satire. And then you have these mind-blowing indie films like It's Such a Beautiful Day, using animation to talk about mortality and mental illness. So that leaves us with the big question, doesn't it? All these historical accidents and business decisions have shaped our view of animation for 100 years. But as a new generation of creators keeps pushing and breaking these old rules, do you think we'll finally get to a day where we just stop calling it cartoons and start seeing it for what it truly is, a medium for any story worth telling?